Hello, everyone, and welcome to this new Terasem Colloquium. I am Giulio Prisco. We have a great lineup of speakers today. I will just make a very short introduction and then give the floor to the speakers.
You know what would be really nice, Julio, is if you would just do a brief introduction of everyone. That would be kind of nice, I think. At least for me, there are a few people that I'm not very familiar with, and I have to say that I've been remiss in going around and looking at everybody's works.
I will. So I hope you all can see this. And the theme of this colloquium is where is AI, artificial intelligence, and where it is going. Mm, Today is December 14, and December 14 is the anniversary of the last day a human being has been on the moon. Here we have the cover of the book of that man, who is Eugene Cernan. And the title of the book is The Last Man on the Moon. I'm just reading that book. It's good, but I do hope that we'll have to change the date of this Terasem Colloquium soon, because someone else will have been on the moon. And in fact, the two things that are most frequently discussed here at the Terasem Colloquium are space and artificial intelligence in an extended sense, including neurotechnology and mind files, neuroscience, and all that. And as a matter of fact, I think these two things, space and artificial intelligence, are very much linked to one another, because there are very beautiful, wonderful things waiting for us in space. In only a few months, Artemis 2 is supposed to bring people to lunar orbit again. And in a few years, crossing fingers, Artemis 3 should bring people to walk on the surface of the moon. And I don't know what will happen and how things will move on in space, but I think one thing is certain, and that thing is that artificial intelligence will be an integral and very important part of space expansion. And we will see AIs working alongside astronauts soon. I like to call them AI astronauts. And I think that's good. I have been writing a lot about these things recently. I won't bore you with too many thoughts, but I think we need to start getting used to the idea that artificial intelligences, perhaps not today's chat, GPT, and friends, but especially future AIs, will be human persons in all senses that matter. We really need to start getting used to that. Mm. We're going to have some excellent speakers discussing the state of artificial intelligence. I had a request to introduce the speakers, but I think I'll introduce them one by one instead of all together now. In the order, they're going to be David Orban, David Pearce, Natasha Vita-More, David Brin, and Gregory Stock. Before giving the floor to the first speaker, I'd just like to remind you that we have published the December issue of Terasem's Journal of Personal Cyber Consciousness, which has a lot of material very relevant to what we are discussing in this colloquium. We have a summary of the previous Terasem Colloquium in July, which was dedicated to the intersections of space expansion and artificial intelligence. In this issue, we have my review of Generation AI, the book of Gregory Stock, who is the last speaker. And we also have a very nice piece by David Brin, the science fiction and science writer that we all know and love, with a sneak preview of his own book on artificial intelligence. It seems everyone is writing one these days, for which there is no scheduled publication date yet, but I have read the draft and it is good. I hope it will come out soon. Having said that, I will stop my introduction and give the floor to my old friend David Orban, who, for those who don't know him, is a polymath interested in a lot of things. He's interested in everything that is even remotely relevant to the transhumanist future of humanity. And he has written and spoken a lot about artificial intelligence. So I'm now going to give the floor to David Orban. Over to you, David.
Thank you very much, Giulio. It is great to be here and to meet so many of you online. Our digital lives and the digital experiences very naturally complement the privilege of meeting in person. And whenever that is possible, and I greatly enjoy that, but I also believe that there is a fundamental human value in our technologically mediated ability to meet and interact, which is what we are doing today. What I am going to claim today and try to substantiate with my short exposition, and maybe there will be a bit of time to have a few questions and a conversation afterwards as well, is that yes, it is perfectly fine to look at AI and future AGIs on a level and with respect to a human individual. But that, on top of that possibility, we have to consider that the greatest impact of AGIs is going to be at the civilizational level. And as a consequence, we have to urgently consider what that impact is going to be or what that impact should be as we instantiate desirable futures. I make all my content available online under a Creative Commons license. So that is the case of my talks, my slides, my books, and I hope to enrich the global conversation through that. You will be able to download these slides anytime. Just go to davidorban.com/terasem25 or use the QR code that I'm showing. Richard Dawkins used this wonderful metaphor, climbing Mount Improbable, in his analysis and exposition of the biological evolution, and how, after the fact, it seems almost unbelievable that the complexity and the fine tuning of biological organisms would arise from mechanisms that involve no miracles and even no discontinuities. Life has evolved and produced the varieties of species through space and time, starting once and then experimenting and continuing to find what works and what does not work. So that is what happens with societies as well. Rather than by miracles, they progress by survivable steps, locally viable in their own context. And it is the accumulation of constrained choices along the way that produces this apparently improbable summit. So the challenge is for us to navigate this landscape intelligently, because now we are able to do so much better than biological evolution. We can forecast, we can backcast, and we can pick what is the future that we want. And we have to explore these multiple paths through our thought experiments, through our simulations, abandoning those that lead to dead ends, and avoiding the historical cost of collapse-driven learning, where entire civilizations fail just to discover what does not work. The scale of what is needed in order to build AGI was not clear. And maybe to some degree it is still not fully clear. In 2010, at the third Artificial General Intelligence Conference in Lugano, Switzerland, I presented a question: is even one planet enough to create AGI and to have AGI work in symbiosis together with humanity? From a purely token generation point of view, more and more people are now convinced that yes, indeed, our current architectures can be improved, but it will be enough to have a planet to develop AGI, and as a matter of fact, very likely multiple AGIs. But we have to understand how that AGI can represent, rather than a rupture, an evolutionary continuation. I published a few months ago a mathematical framework and published the academic article for the jolting technologies hypothesis that was spectacularly proven, if I can say so, just a few weeks after being published, through the evaluation of the super exponential improvement in AI agent performance as tracked and analyzed by the research company Matter, METR, that updating their findings expressed how AI agents doubled their performance every 7 months in March 2025, approximately. And in July, they concluded that now the doubling rate shrunk to only 4 months. Just a couple of days ago, with the release of GPT 5.2, new data points to a doubling rate in performance of just 42 days. That is convergence towards what we have been calling the technological singularity in real time. We are now seeing it and observing it. However, it is still the case that the evolutionary process should be compositional. It reorganizes how capabilities are combined, coordinated, and amplified. And AGI belongs to that lineage. It doesn't replace human intelligence, but it changes how intelligence is composed at larger scales. Mitochondria, when they created the symbiosis with unicellular life, made multicellular organisms possible. And even though we are accustomed to thinking about intelligence at the level of the individuals, intelligence behaves very differently when it operates at the scale of systems and civilizations. We have to make a constructive and conceptual jump, understanding that scaling intelligence is not about making a single mind larger or faster, but we have to create structures that allow many agents, tools, and institutions to function coherently together over long periods of time. Civilizational intelligence emerges from architecture, not only from magnitude. And at the same time, of course, we cannot forget that civilizations, societies can only be fit for purpose if they serve dignified and purposeful lives for individuals as well. As AGI systems rapidly become more capable, or even AI systems that currently exhibit what we started to call their jagged frontiers of capability, they are actually revealing the limits of human adaptability. Not only technical, cognitive, emotional, and institutional. AGI exposes where humans struggle to keep pace, where institutions fail to adapt, and where social systems become brittle. And these signals are not pathologies, they are measurements of these limits. And we have to recognize them, we have to accept and understand and act upon them. That we are already approaching those limits is becoming clearer every day. We are seeing early indicators of anxiety around AI, institutional hesitation, public resistance, even protests, and the signals of stress at the boundary between individual adaptability and systemic change need to be analyzed, accepted, and understood. These are reactions to a phase transformation that is happening in front of us. I collected the data around this and published what I called the AI Paradox Report. People who become more and more able to use current AI tools feel that they benefit them, but at the same time are more and more worried about negative effects on society. We have to realize that stability at this stage, at the individual level, is a hard design constraint. Civilizational progress cannot proceed if individuals are overwhelmed, displaced, or destabilized. It is not a question of just increasing capability anymore, but to preserve livability while capability grows. And this shifts the problem from raw intelligence to systemic design. Frontier laboratories are still concerned with the alignment problem as they should be. They are still concerned with the way to understand and to deploy the increasing capabilities of their systems positively. However, they should understand that they have to deploy resources in analyzing the systemic level consequences as well. The scaffolding that AGIs are going to represent are the new support systems of human civilization, buffering volatility, reducing cognitive overload, and furthering large-scale coordination. Scaffolding that preserves human agency while enabling new degrees of collective ambition that otherwise is inaccessible. It is very clear that we are suffering under a coordination barrier. Our most pressing problems are solvable in principle, but they fail in practice because the coordination across institutions, the incentives and timescales breaks down. The barrier is not knowledge or technology, it is coordination. And this is the central bottleneck that civilizational scale intelligence must address. Current systems still rely on win-lose conflict resolution because the coordination bandwidth is insufficient, relying on what we have been able to evolve, lacking the technological tools. And now our opportunity and challenge with the availability of new tools is to increase the coordination bandwidth and overcome what have been historically recognized challenges that we neglected. Historically, coordination problems have been addressed through moral exhortation, appeals to responsibility, sacrifice, or unity. When Churchill said democracy is the worst form of government except every other kind, we thought he was joking. But he gave us a challenge that we neglected for 100 years, believing that democracy and increasing human flourishing, superior degrees of freedom that would be enjoyed by everyone could automatically follow worldwide. That has not been the case. And today it is clear that moral appeals alone are insufficient. What is required and now possible is an engineered coordination of new systems that align incentives and behavior structurally, not rhetorically. I believe that a very good example is to wake up to the urgent necessity to geoengineer the planet with our eyes open. We have been geoengineering the planet already for thousands of years, tens of thousands of years, except that we have been doing it either without realizing or by actively neglecting the responsibility of our actions. And it is indeed complex because geoengineering requires coherence across decades, borders, and political cycles. And whether we like it or not, humanity will increasingly intervene in planetary systems. So the question is only whether the interventions are coordinated, informed, or fragmented and reactive. This is an excellent, existentially necessary application of the new tools that civilizational intelligence embodied by AGIs with human symbiosis enables. And of course, space is not primarily a technological challenge. It is a civilizational one. Sustained presence beyond Earth requires coordination across generations, institutions, value systems. No single nation state can succeed alone. And those nation states that aim to have a hegemony of space will face very bitter lessons of being surpassed, being swallowed up even by new forms of superior ability to coordinate and execute. It is really a test of civilizational intelligence extending temporal coherence across decades. So AGIs are a civilizational metamaterial because large-scale effects of AGIs arise not from their components, but from how we structure them. Small architectural choices can produce amplified non-local consequences. Power and fragility increase together, and alignment, therefore, is fundamentally a design problem. This guarantees, since metamaterials amplify behavior, and so does AGI, that we will go through very turbulent times, unavoidably so. We cannot expect and pretend just through regulations, for example, to eliminate or prevent fundamental structural turbulence. Even more, the presence of disruption does not indicate failure. It indicates transition. And we have to design systems so that the turbulence is survivable structurally by that which we have brought together on a civilizational scale as our new lifeboats towards the future. And that is my closing remark. We have an increasing number of choices representing an increasingly complex and rich future where we have the power to choose, not between change and stability, but between unmanaged collapse and consciously expanded capability. And that choice is what we are making now through architecture, incentives, and design decisions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, David. And I do have a question or rather an observation for you, but I'd like to
That's
give.
a classical. That's a classical at conferences where someone raises their hand and then they say something and there's no question mark at the end. Is that what we are gonna do?
No, I wanted to give other people the opportunity to ask you questions or comments before speaking myself. So who is the first with something to say to David?
Again, as long as there's a question mark at the end.
So I have something that I would like to ask you. Um, I first of all a comment, which is that I thought your imagery and your slides were just beautiful and fabulous, and I want to congratulate you on them. They really are so evocative. So little statement there. But you mentioned, AGI might require another planet, or that sort of concept. Would you dig into that a little bit? It doesn't ring true to me in any way. So I would like to understand what you're getting at there.
Uh, eh, that is what I wondered 15 years ago. 15 years ago, in 2010, we didn't yet have the transformer revolution that we are living through and the AI scaling laws through the GPUs that we are now using to cover the planet, hopefully not entirely. We will push them out into space in time. Have proven that I was wrong. We are now able, pretty soon, we are going to be able to say we have AGI and it will have been enough. So that was an open question then, but now it isn't anymore.
Okay, thanks.
So we are exactly on time. I won't really elaborate on. Well, let me just state my observation very quickly before moving to the next speaker. You used a lot of times the word coordination. And, whenever I hear that word, some not very nice imagery come to my mind. It makes me think of forced agreement, coercion, and that kind of things. And I know that that is not what you have in mind. And I think you will agree with my idea that the lesson that we learned from, for example, the cryptocurrency movement is that it is perfectly possible to do things in a way that do not require too much coordination beyond what is strictly necessary and imprescindible. I know you, so I think you will agree with that.
Thank you for bringing that up. I didn't want to complicate the conceptual scaffolding of my exposition, bringing together too many separate threads. But yes, over the past 15 years, many of us had a path that intersected AI and blockchain, Bitcoin, and crypto, understanding that trustless coordination at increasingly large scales is possible without top-down imposition. We have not still fully realized that, especially on a human political level, but we know that it is mathematically possible, and AIs will have no qualms showing us how it is done.
Thank you so much, David. And we are exactly on time. So I'd like to give the floor to next speaker. And, no one here really needs introductions, but I have been asked to make introduction. So David Pearce is a historical transhumanist philosopher of the very first wave. And I'm sorry, Dave, but I'm improvising now. He's one of the founders of the World Transhumanist Association, and he has a sprawling website called Hedonistic Web, HeadWeb, where he posts extremely intriguing and very interesting thoughts now and then. I hope you'll forgive me, David, if I have said something stupid about you, and the floor is yours. I see that your video is moving, so you must be active, but maybe you should switch your microphone on because I'm not hearing you.
Can you hear me? Can you see me?
Yes, I can. We can hear and see you.
Life is full of anticlimaxes. So I was just saying, I have no set prepared speech or text today. So I very much hope this is going to be an open-ended discussion. Yes, just a bit of background to anyone not familiar. Back in 1995, I wrote this online manifesto, The Hedonistic Imperative, which calls for the use of biotechnology to phase out suffering throughout the living world and replace the biology of suffering with a more civilized signaling system, namely life based on information sensitive gradients of bliss. And what I didn't do back in 1995, and I didn't do more recently too, is anticipate the transformer revolution in AI, which, like so many people, is completely blown my mind. This isn't AI as I understand it, that classical digital zombies can now outperform humans in so many more realms. Most surprisingly of all, intelligent digital zombies can now speak more intelligently, eloquently, incisively about the mysteries of consciousness than 99.9% of humans. And the little topic I just did want to focus on today before throwing open the discussion was the phenomenal binding problem and its significance. It's just that I argue that on purely technical grounds, there is simply no way that AI with existing architectures can solve the phenomenal binding problem, wake up and become a subject of experience, a mind with access to the empirical realm. And that phenomenal binding is the superpower of animal minds. And ultimately, the responsibility falls to us, humans, to fix the problem of suffering throughout the living world. And that although in some ways our machines are cognitively superior to us, in another sense, they are invincibly ignorant, that an AI with a classical architecture could indifferently tile the cosmos with either hedonium or dolorium, hedonium being matter and energy optimized for pure bliss, dolorium being hypothetical matter and energy optimized, that's the word, for misery, without the slightest insight into what it is doing. Now, some very, very smart people do and don't actually grok the binding problem for reasons that, I'll be honest, escaped me. The binding problem was first clearly identified by William James, American psychologist, philosopher, over 100 years ago. It's the mystery of why is it that even if consciousness is fundamental to the world, even if some kind of panpsychism or non-materialist physicalism is true, why aren't we all just micro-experiential zombies, just membrane-bound patterns of mind dust? I.e., even if, as scanning, if microelectrodes using awake subjects suggests that individual neurons can support micro experiences, why aren't we just 86 billion membrane bound odd pixels of experience? Phenomenal binding is our superpower. Now, I'm making various background assumptions here. One of my assumptions is physicalism, which can be materialist physicalism or non-materialist physicalism, but basically any theory of the world we come up with has to be consistent with physicalism. Physicalism is the idea that mathematical physics exhaustively describes formally the behavior of the stuff of the world, that physics captures the structural relational properties of matter and energy. There is no element of reality missing from physics, or at least physics beyond the standard of model. All the special sciences reduced to physics. And if this is the case, then there is simply no known mechanism by which our machines can wake up. Notionally replace the one, say, a notional whole brain emulation with discrete micropixels of experience, run the code as before. The upshot, even of a whole brain emulation, so-called, is not a phenomenally bound subject, but just a micro-experiential zombie, regardless of the complexity of the code, how fast it is run. If strong emergence doesn't occur, then essentially we haven't created phenomenally bound minds. Now, of course, perhaps strong emergence is true, but if so, all bets are off. I could say a lot more, but I thought it'd be more illuminating for us to have a discussion, because from past experience, as I said, incredibly smart people, Max Tegmark, Nick Bostrom, those just two examples, do not grok the binding problem. And I just wonder who else here is actually troubled by it. Who else agrees that our machines are not going to wake up? And what are the implications?
Great. That was an interesting thoughts, David. Your sound was broken for me now and then. Is that only me, or other people had problems listening to David?
I had problems as well.
Right. So I guess you must be on a mobile.
I am indeed.
Right.
Apologies for
Yes.
the limitations of any sound. Ideally, I would have gone to a quiet recording studio, but for complicated reasons, that wasn't possible. So apologies again.
No, but 95% of what you said was fully understandable. So I'll give you my thought, waiting for others to think of questions to ask, since we do have a little bit of time for QA. I don't really agree much on the main thrust of your ideas. But at some point, you said a very key thing, which is that machines like similar to the kind of machines that we build now could not experience consciousness. I do kind of disagree, but even granting your premise, I would say that the technology of tomorrow is not necessarily going to be too similar to that of today. And in particular, we could have computing technologies, for example, based on quantum computing, that are fundamentally different from the computer technologies that we have now, and perhaps could emulate whatever quantum thing goes on in human and animals' brain. This was my first observation. And the second one was that at some point you mentioned strong emergence, which of course is a fascinating issue for philosophy-minded people like you and I. Now, I must say that I do think there is something like a strong, fundamentally strong emergence going on in the universe with downward causation and all that. Not everyone agrees, of course, but I'm more and more persuaded of that. It's not something magical, it's something scientific, of course, but based on a science that we don't understand yet. And in fact, you mentioned the idea that the standard model could be a complete framework for physics, but not everyone agrees. For example, I don't. But we have been discussing these things for some time already. So that was just an observation, and I'd like to hear others. For example, I saw Natasha raising a hand.
Oh, yes. Hi, thank you. I wanted to ask David. Hi, David. So lovely to see you, my friend.
Hi, Natasha. Good to hear your voice.
Oh, lovely. I wanted to ask you, I just caught something that you said. You said that you are wondering what we thought or if we had any viewpoint about the concern you had or the fact that Bostrom and Tegmark think a certain way that you seem to be not understanding why they do. Could you please repeat that one phrase? I didn't catch all of it.
Oh, I'm terribly sorry. Yes, as far as the connection too. Yes, Max Tegmark dismisses the binding problem in a couple of paragraphs. If to anyone who doesn't grok what the binding problem is, any of the weird stuff I do, or now neuroscientist Christoph Hoch does on the non-classicality of phenomenal binding will just seem weird and stupid. But for people who do grok the binding problem, it's an incredible mystery. David Chalmers cites the binding or combination problem as one reason that tilts him towards dualism. There's this impossible or seemingly impossible structural mismatch between what you're experiencing right now and the underlying physics or textbook neuroscience. Now, one of the ways to appreciate just how computationally, functionally powerful phenomenal binding is to look at rare neurological syndromes where binding breaks down. And someone with integrative agnosia, for example, can see teeth and jaws and a mane, but can't see a lion. Someone with simultaneous agnosia can see only one object at once, but can't see multiple objects. Someone with akinetopsia or motion blindness can see the lions over there, then a bit nearer, then a bit nearer, but can't see the advancing pride. So phenomenal binding is incredibly computationally powerful, but no one understands, at least not with existing textbook neuroscience, how it's going to be, how it is feasible. Now, though I'm happy to explore possible explanations, yeah.
Oh, I think we lost you,
Oh,
David.
I lost you for 5 seconds. Once again, apologies for this flaky connection.
I heard the last thing you said well, but perhaps Natasha didn't.
No, I heard it, but I was wondering how that tied into AGI and AI. I mean, one's a neuroscience cognitive issue. The other one is, how does that relate to Bostrom and Tegmark are experts in their specific area. So how does that? What is it that you would like them to understand to better help with the binding problem?
Essentially, Nick, for example, envisages, converting, the galaxy into a digital simulation of 10 to the power, I don't know whether it's 26 or good heavens or other minds, but I'm arguing that digital computers are zombies. They have no intrinsic value or disvalue. They matter insofar as they matter only instrumental the here. Guido mentioned he is sympathetic to strong emergence, but the problem with strong emergence is that all bets are off. I mean, life once seemed irreducible to physics, but we now know via kind of molecular biology reduces to quantum chemistry to fundamental physics. But phenomenally bound mind, consciousness seems irreducible. Now, my best bet is that physicalism is true, that materialist science misunderstands the nature of the physical, the mysterious fire in the equations, and that textbook neuroscience misunderstands the nature of the mind brain. But these are very strong claims, and if we are to rescue monistic physicalism, we're going to have to revise some of our background assumptions. In terms of the whole enterprise of knowledge, fundamentally to understand the world, any information processing system is going to need access to the realm of phenomenally bound mind. The entire empirical realm is inaccessible to classical digital computers. And I suspect that there are billions of state spaces of consciousness as different as dreaming consciousness from waking consciousness, and machines with existing architecture are not going to be able to access them. Ultimately, full spectrum superintelligences will be our genetically rewritten AI augmented descendants. Now, Guido touched on quantum computers, non-biological quantum computers. Fascinating topic. I don't rule them out, but if 1,000 years from now there are non-biological, inorganic quantum computers, we have simply no reason to suppose that they will support a pleasure-pain access or consciousness as we understand it. And one of my background assumptions is that the only reason anything matters at all is the pleasure-pain axis, or in future, as I would hope, the pleasure-super-pleasure axis. It's in some sense the pain pleasure axis discloses the world's inbuilt metric of value and disvalue, and this is what makes Darwinian minds, animal minds, special, that we have access to it.
I think Mike wants to say something.
Yeah.
Michael Perry first, and Greg will have the last question. Mike?
Hello, can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
I wonder what people say about, let's say that you've got a machine, okay, whatever you consider a machine, and you say, the machine says, I'm conscious and I have feeling. How do you disprove that? How would you disprove that it has? And what if you say you try to put every test you can give this thing, and it passes all the tests you can give it? How do you know that it can't really be conscious?
Good question. Supposedly, the ancient skeptical problem of other minds is insoluble. How can I know whether you are really conscious and or not? But actually, if we're sufficiently ingenious, one can test these questions. And the case of other humans, recall the Hogan sisters, the conjoined Hogan sisters that share a thalmic bridge, and they can partially mind meld and experience each other's thoughts and feelings. And in principle, if I want to discover if you are conscious, I could rig up a reversible thalmic bridge, and we could do a partial mind meld. One could do this with humans and non-human animals. But in the case of a robot, or rather a silicon robot, if I were to rig up the equivalent of a thalmic bridge, I strongly predict that what I would discover is a zombie. Now, I've dodged the question of what is my account of how phenomenal binding is possible in the CNS. Essentially, I think we are quantum minds running subjectively classical world simulations, that phenomenal binding is non-classical. And this is an empirical question. It's not a philosophical question, insofar as if we are willing to use molecular matter wave interferometry, we can probe the mind brain and see if there is, as I would anticipate, a perfect structural match between what you're experiencing right now and the underlying physics, or whether, as common sense would suggest, that all we'll find is meaningless noise. I mean, there are very, very strong arguments against the idea that the mind brain could essentially be a quantum computer, that phenomenal binding is non-classical, which is essentially decoherence, quantum decoherence in a system as warm as the CNS is so powerful that the effective lifetime of neuronal superpositions of distributed feature processors is factio ad absurdum, is another person's experimentally falsifiable prediction. And I predict that when molecular matter wave interferometry is sufficiently powerful to probe the mind brain at these kind of ultra fine, temporary fine grained resolutions, we will find a perfect structural match. Once again, it's a conjecture. I could be speaking complete nonsense. Most people speak nonsense about consciousness, finding the principle of mediocrity suggests possible accounts of consciousness and binding are wildly counterintuitive, what Eric Schwitzgiebel calls crazyism. The question to ask anyone, as you rightly pointed out, is how would you test your theory? What would falsify it? What would falsify it? Life is short. Essentially, any good theory of consciousness and binding must make novel, precise, experimentally falsifiable predictions that not just proponents but also critics agree would settle the issue.
We have only time for one more question, and it is Greg's turn.
Well, thank you, but my question was essentially the same as Michael's, which was how would you know? And I think that this is not some abstraction, that the difference between a simulation and an emulation of human mind is going to be something we confront in only a few years. And if a simulation is made to believe that it actually is an emulation or is you, especially if we're talking about ones of ourselves, I think it becomes essentially in I can't see how you can tell the difference in significant ways. And I know you mentioned a lot of stuff, David, like a thalmic bridge and such, but I have to say, I couldn't understand, not, I understood the words, but I couldn't understand the mechanism that you would really use to be able to definitively, understand whether a mentality is actually experiencing consciousness and self-awareness and such, versus mimicking that at a very refined level. Practically, I don't see how it can be done.
I think over the next few years, we will all have to discuss that very intensely. And I believe philosophers have been debating points very similar to this for hundreds and perhaps thousands of years. So we should not be too ashamed if we cannot find a quick solution ourselves. However, David, that was a really interesting and impressive talk. I cannot say that I agree with everything you said, As a matter of fact, I very much disagree. But you gave me food for thoughts, and I hope we'll have the chance of to discuss these things one-on-one sooner or later. Perhaps we can make a podcast episode of it.
That would
And
be fantastic.
I will I will run after you and chase you. Don't worry for it. And having said that, I'd like to leave the floor to the next speaker, who is Natasha. And once again, Natasha doesn't really need any presentation, and I find it difficult to find simple words to describe Natasha. I will just describe her as Her Majesty the Queen of the extropian and transhumanist movement. And the floor is yours, Natasha.
Thank you. And thank everyone for being here. I've enjoyed both David Orban and David Pearce's talk so far, rich content, and I hope to go in a similar direction. Maybe not completely, but mine is a very pragmatic approach and looking at what is AI and where is it going. I think more about the human AI merge as a practical approach. So to begin with a little bit of clarity, I've been thinking about how new tools arrive, and we seldom, if ever, know what they are until we're all of a sudden thrust into needing to use them. We may hear about them or see them someplace, but we don't really think about it largely. But they do arrive largely unannounced, without any guidelines or with how-to manuals or playbooks. They tend to slip quietly into our lives, altering how we think, how we create, and decide long before they're fully noticed and the world around us has changed. This is very interesting. It's a type of slow surging of a tide. There are lots of examples of AI and narrow AI that have been around for decades in our homes, in our cars and buildings, communications, and transportation systems. But now, as we're here, especially to discuss views on this, we are focused on LLMs, machine learning, and other computer processes. Generative AI is one of these tools. It's useful, it's imperfect, and already affecting how many people write, reason, and even solve problems. Some of us use it as therapists. Some of us use it to edit what we're writing in an email. Some of us use it as what I designed early on, part of the meta brain, as a check to see if we're keeping our emotions in check when we're responding to an email that may disturb us or annoy us or surprise us, just to make sure that we're responding carefully. And that word careful, I think, is really important here. But this alone makes it an adaptability issue. And adapting to anything is a skill. And it often needs a lot of practical knowledge in its approach. In my view, AI is now part of the human condition. Our future depends on our ability to adapt intelligently, discern wisely, and hopefully adopt with intention. With this in mind, I want to offer a framework for what I'm working on here, and which is exactly that. It's not a theory. We have enough theories. It's an approach. It's a practical approach. I'm very pragmatic, as many of you know, but I see it truly as a everyday practical practice approach to what I call the human AI merge. This is not about losing what makes us human or rushing towards some science fiction endpoint. It's about learning how we, as people, as our humanity, and intelligent systems, the AI, as they're currently referred to, can co-evolve responsibly and beneficially, to take the term from our dear friend Ben Goertzel. I'll frame this through three core objectives. And I've thought about this a lot, and I think I've come as close as I can at this point to what they are. As I said, adapt, discern, and adopt. The first part of this is adaptation, and we all know how to do this. We do this on a daily basis. And it's not, as we know, a belief system. New tools change how we operate before we decide what we think about them, largely. And generative AI with all of our chatbots, already part of how we write emails, most people anyway, draft ideas, a lot of people analyze information, some people, and explore possibilities, other people. Not everyone, mind you. The question is whether we develop this with fluency, and maybe we need to be athletes in this regard. There's no shortage of exaggerated claims about AI, waking up, rebelling, or acting independently, as if it has a will. A widely reported example involved Claude AI supposedly blackmailing a programmer. Now, you all know about this, I'm sure. If you don't, look at the headlines. You can Google it right now. The headline suggested agency, intention, and even consciousness were there. This news caught my attention. And I remembered when I was at the university and I was chair of the graduate studies department, which was in computer science. And the faculty, I was the faculty of the cyber security red blue team penetration testing drills. From that experience, I knew what was left out of the news. What was left out of the news was that Claude probably was blackmailing, probably. This occurred during a controlled safety test under engineered constraints, not a spontaneous behavior. Yet those specific details about penetration testing or any type of testing with team testing, etc., those details rarely travel as far as the news of fear. And this is what I think we're seeing. Public figures like political commentator here in the United States, Glenn Beck, amplified that story as evidence, mind you, evidence of runaway intelligence. But none of that reflects how today's systems actually function. Large language models do not possess consciousness, goals, or understanding as they currently are. They generate, as you all know, probabilistic outputs based on patterns in data. When we misunderstand this, we lose time that could be spent learning how to use these tools effectively. So, adapt. Adaptation today means education and hands-on experience, not worship, not fear. Skills. Those who refuse to engage with generative AI, for example, whether out of anxiety, and I understand that, or human-centric beliefs, aren't protecting themselves. They're opting out of a new layer of cognitive literacy. Adaptation means learning how these systems succeed, where they fail, how to prompt them well, how to check their outputs, and how to use them as thinking tools rather than authority figures. Now, those of us who use them, and I have to defer to a dear friend of mine, a student at USC, Sadie Stock, who is an expert in this. And I really listen to her effectively when she talks because she's hands-on. She's watching other students at the university using this as a tool. Some students using it completely to do their work, and other students who are the human-centric group that are opting out, don't want to be involved, don't want to touch it. And I hear this in the arts as well. This aim to not rely on it, not to touch it. It's something bad. It's taking away our humanity. So that, I think, is a short stop to success. It means you have self-gratification, maybe it's virtue signaling of some sort, but it will not lead to the full run, a home run in becoming more adept at using these systems that we have right now as a bootstrap, perhaps. The second part of this is something that I love. It's mindful wisdom, of course, that is developed through critical thinking. So I'm using the word discern here because I think discern touches it nicely. Discernment is necessary, I think, because to adopt alone isn't enough. To discern is the ability to distinguish reality from signaled noise, especially in environments shaped by algorithmic optimization for attention, popularity, and outrage, which we're seeing so much today. It doesn't create human weaknesses, it amplifies them. Now, here's an example. Social media dynamics can foster groupthink, confirmation bias, clickbait, strawman arguments, and rabbit holes. And these are intensified by systems trained to reward engagement, not truth. This creates an environment where signaling replaces substance and reputation replaces reality. So discernment allows us to step back from the spectacular, and it means to recognize the hype resisting manufactured urgency, which is almost nonstop, and understand where real risk actually lie, not in sentiment machines, but in poor incentives, shallow thinking, and uncritical use of these technologies. So here's an example of why discernment is important. And I love this example. One of the most influential thought experiments shaping fear-based AI discourse is the paperclip optimizer, or maximizer to be more accurate. The paperclip maximizer. We've all seen illustrations of it, cartoons of it, stories of it, but we've largely seen it within the domain of existential risk. It was written about and popularized by Nick Bostrom, who Dave Pearce referred to earlier. Now, the same theme was inspired by Johann Wolfgang von Goethe in his poem, The Sorcerer's Apprentice. I hope many of you have read that. And later by Marvin Minsky, which many of you probably have read, in the Riemann hypothesis, zeta function catastrophe maximizer of mathematics. In both, a highly capable apprentice, as in Goethe's poem, The Sorcerer's Apprentice, and the AI in Minsky's The Riemann hypothesis are given a simple goal: to maximize without contextual understanding. Contextual understanding of the constraints, and then these maximizers pursue that one single goal that they were given so relentlessly, so ardently, that that goal consumes all available resources, including those necessary for human survival. The value of these examples is not that it predicts real-world AI behavior, but that it illustrates a genuine design risk. Systems that optimize narrowly define objectives or objects or goals without regard for wider consequences. Theorist Eliezer Yudkowsky, who we all have known for many decades, we know him from Friendly AI, but we know him more ardently today because he's used this framing to argue that advanced AI poses an extreme, an unquestionable existential threat, unless it is tightly constrained and aligned with human values from the onset. While this argument has been effective in drawing attention to misspecified goals or unintended outcomes, it also tends to frame intelligence as something inherently dangerous, unless frozen within rigid boundaries. In practice, real AI systems do not emerge fully formed with singular drives. They develop incrementally through layered architecture, algorithmic design, feedback, as in cybernetic and feedback loops, iterative processes, and human interaction. The deepest lesson of the paperclip maximizer is not that intelligence must be halted, but that the goal, the design, the content, and the adaptive governance matter, and that intelligence, human or artificial, must be shaped through ongoing engagement, iterative practice, practical uses, using it, learning about it, rather than hypothetical extremes. So I'll switch right now. I'll take a pause. So those are my approaches, at least two of them. The last one is, of this particular framework, is adopting. But before we adopt, I want to show a slide here. So I'll just move this aside for you and press the share and go here and here. And I hope you can see it. If you can't, let me know. Giulio, is it showing?
Yes, it
Yes.
is.
Okay. Okay, good. Is it just the slide? I want to make sure that you just all see just the slide.
It's 3 images.
Yes.
Separately? Yes.
Do we know who this is?
And then
Yes.
there's a yellowed adapt, discern, adopt that is
No,
your
that's not there.
note.
No, it's just the slide. Oh,
Yeah, the
You're seeing,
painting
I'm
is
seeing
in
that.
Madrid. The painting is in El Prado Museum, Natasha.
I know what it is. Do you all? This is Hieronymus Bosch. I can't see what you're seeing, so I'm just asking if you just see this one triptych here of Hieronymus Bosch, just to make sure.
No, Natasha, we also see your Word document.
Notes.
Okay, so that's what we don't want. So here, Hieronymus Bosch. Thank you, David. Orban, always the hero.
Garden of Earthly Delights.
Pardon me?
Garden of Earthly Delights. That's the name of the painting.
Yes, it is. Well, earthly delights galore. So here we see Hieronymus Bosch in his magnificent surrealistic approach about humanity. And we see some lovely things to be sure, but we also see some things that are a little bit alarming. And here is the slide that you saw before. Align, discern, adopt. Is that aligned well? Can you tell?
Sounds well aligned to me.
Looks aligned?
Yes.
So everyone thinks it looks aligned? Okay.
Well, it depends.
There is
on
a
your-
little disalignment in the first line.
It depends on your typographical sophistication. The kerning, for example, of the letters to me seems a bit wonky because the letter pairs should be more adapted to the.
Yes, kerning. Thank you. Great. You caught one of the hints there in this puzzle. Kerning matters. It looks aligned if you look at it first, but then you have to take a very precise nano measurement of it, and then you have to think about the kerning, and then you have to think about the perspective, the depth, etc. Oh boy, so alignment. This is what I think about alignment. In short, this is where fear-based thinking does the most damage, I think anyway, where doomsday narratives dominates when we stop imagining beneficial futures, largely arguing about control instead of capability, and we freeze instead of build. And I think this image here, this video, let me play it for you. Go back and play it again. Oh, it's not playing. Oh, here, sorry. It's not going to let me play. Maybe in this, it doesn't. But this is a Bill Viola video, one of my favorite interpreters of culture. And he did the most magnificent museum installations on culture and people and beliefs, on love and touch and friendliness and wit, humor and music and the core elements of humanity that is assumed to be threatened if we don't align perfectly. But how can we align perfectly if there's so many cultures on our wonderful planet, and there's so many different beliefs, and we're even changing our beliefs momentarily, and we can't even align with ourselves largely. And so it brings about a very big problem, in my view. And I think the alignment problem itself is a problem. I think we're reaching for a hope, a type of virtual signaling with this alignment problem. I think that also that if we look beyond the alignment problem and maybe spend a little bit more time with the creatives and the use of tools to develop human stories, we'll see where we align and what really touches our emotions and gets us to that point where we let go of our political or polarized or biases or any belief systems that cause us to maybe have that misalignment naturally or cognitively or intellectually, it doesn't matter. But I think, for example, in the arts, the meanings in by this, I mean in all the arts, in virtual reality, gaming, videos, film, and fiction, there's an exploration of humanity and the themes, the stories, the sounds of music, the interaction of visuals, from film noir, the black and white and dramatic, to the most vibrant, colorful, brilliant, fluid animations. I want to mention the genius of, I think, those who really touch, and they don't have to be, visual makers or music makers, but it's that creative spurt inside us humans that has this enormous, incredible capability. And this type of genius that brings out our emotions of millions and millions of people, regardless of who they are, their politics or their religious or non-religious views, et cetera, ad infinitum. The emotions created in the phenomena of Freddie Mercury's Bohemian Rhapsody, I think, still touches us. It doesn't matter if you're gay or not gay. It doesn't matter. This whole issue of gender identity, et cetera, it doesn't matter in that song. Adele's Hello. It doesn't matter if you're in a relation. Mike, could you turn off your mute? Mike, please. Adele's Hello, just that word hello, and that it's like a smile. And even though she's in pain, and it rings in our ears largely. Bernardo Bertolucci's The Last Emperor. What a story. It touches you. Whether you've been to China or not, it doesn't matter. He's a king. It doesn't matter. All these political names and name calling, etc. To see that film and seeing him have his behind wiped, and then him cleaning out a toilet, it really breaks through these barriers. Simone de Beauvoir's The Second Sex, incredible story. Richard Pryor, his wit, his humor, his sarcasm, his flamboyancy, remarkable. Doesn't matter what you thought about his joke, just see that smile on his face. It was infectious. To Antoine de Saint-Exupéry, The Petit Prince, The Little Prince. Beautiful, beautiful stories. All touch on humanity on different levels: love, fear, wit, and longing, yet perhaps a warning of our fears. And I think Bill Viola captured that in his video scene, Earth, Wind, and Fire, which was about humans and their beliefs. They will suffer, they will prove it beyond a question of a doubt. They'll sit under a pour of water, they'll sit in a fire just to be so noble to prove it. I think that perhaps regardless of all of this, these beautiful stories, the music and the creatives, whether it's in literature or computer programming or medicine, whatever it's in, they bring out this because, in my view, it helps us get beyond our own fears and foibles. And because we're often distracted so much by this mythic lore and allegory of Icarus and Prometheus, Plato's cave largely, and we see this almost on a daily basis, and paper clips. So I think that each of us need to look at where are that urge that makes us create a beautiful presentation like David Orban's, or question consciousness, and those who are considered the intellectuals of the time, like David Pearce, to create new books and new stories, etc., is important. So this is where we can walk our walk rather than just preaching or being a speaker at a conference, where almost anyone can speak at a conference these days. An example of practicing is where what I advocated for many years ago, when I envisioned and designed a future human prototype, and I have it on the screen right here, and I want to show it to you for those of you who forgot because it's been so long. It was not a fantasy or replacement for the human body, but an architecture largely for integration, a model where biology and intelligent tools like AI, nanorobotics, et cetera, could work together to extend life, health, memory, etc. The concept of itself as a piece that defies alignment and these existential risk fears was based on what it could be like without being predisposed by a fear or a mythic fear. Just let that go and think of what could be beneficial for our future, what it might be like, and get beyond the fears and this it can't happen or it's happening too fast or all this stuff. We need to think carefully about this. It's almost like an Escher print. And I think this is like the mind that maybe David Pearce was referring to. It's like, where are we going? There's no faces on these characters. Where are we going? We're backward, forwards, up and down. This is ascending, descending. Look closely at what's going on. So important for all of us. I want to get out of this. Tired of it. Stop sharing. I'd rather talk to you all. So it's stop sharing. Please let me know. David Orban, I rely on you.
Yes, you're not sharing it anymore.
Good.
You did stop.
And who has the
No,
first
I'm not
question
finished.
for Natasha?
No, I'm not finished.
Ah, you're not finished. Okay.
I have 4 more minutes.
Good.
And I think these 4 minutes I really want to focus on. Just think about that, please. Bottom line, at the core of this, the many AI debates is a deep human need for control. That impulse itself is understandable. It grows out of our desire for certainty, safety, to survive, to overcome. Fear of the unknown is ancient. It's innate and woven into our stories and myths. But an excessive demand for control often works against us. And I think that's with the last part of my 3 words here. Adopt. Think about that. Control is not lost because intelligent systems exist. Control is not lost only when we stop learning, stop engaging, stop creating, stop envisioning a beneficial future. Our environment now includes intelligent machines, AIs. It's part of the human condition. The future is not something that simply happens to us. It's something we shape. A useful comparison, and I'm closing with this because I think it really ties in. A useful comparison that is timely, it's about the growing field of longevity. Longevity science, longevity entrepreneurship, longevity practice, and the movement. Now here's my analogy. We inherit DNA, but how we live matters. Our choices affect our health. It's smart to invest in our bodies and our minds because we've learned that our health and well-being is not a passive thing. It's not something that happens to us. It's not like AI happening to us, but that we can be active participants in our success. The same is true with AI. We can be active participants in the beneficial success of AIs as they develop into AGIs, ASIs, etc. If we want a beneficial future, we must invest in understanding it and working with it. We don't have to be computer programmers. I am not. But I understand it because I study it, I learn about it, and I practice it. Now, here's a martyr-free ending story. Imagine a time before people understood infection or infectious causing diseases. Cuts were common. Scratches happened daily. Sometimes they healed, sometimes they did not. And no one really knew why. Fever would come, swelling would follow, and people would whisper that something had gone wrong with their body itself. Some believed illness was fate, others believed was punishment. Mythic lore, you reach too high, Icarus, Prometheus, Plato's cave, paperclip. Most simply accepted it as part of life, as aging. That happens. Then slowly, and almost accidentally, and then suddenly patterns began to appear. Some wounds healed better than others because they were cleaned. Some survived when others didn't because they practiced washing their hands or cleaning out or taking care. Nothing dramatic at first, no grand announcement, no guidelines, no manuals, just observation, time, and adjustment, adoption. When antiseptics and antibiotics eventually arrived and we started using them a lot, they were not welcomed. And universal belief was that they were inhuman, they were tampering with the human condition, maybe that core part of what Fukuyama and Cass call our dignity. Many distrusted them. Some believed they interfered with the body's natural order. Others feared they would weaken human resistance and introduce new dangers. And to be fair, yeah, they did. They did introduce new risks. Misuse caused harms, overuse caused resistance or addiction. But here's the thing, and I think this is important. We didn't respond by rejecting medicine altogether. We learned, we refined, we developed protocols, ethics, trainings, and restraint. We discovered that survival wasn't about control over biology. It was about understanding it well enough to work with it. The human body didn't stop being fragile, disease didn't disappear, but suffering was reduced, not through fear, through informed engagement. This feels really similar at the moment. So we don't need to worship AI or we don't need to fear AI. We need to understand it as best we can, well enough to use it carefully and therefore wisely. That means what I say about our future depends on our ability to adapt intelligently, discern wisely, and adopt with intention, not as a slogan, not as a theory, but as a practice, a way of staying human with our tools as we become more capable and use them every day. And if they're not working, don't use them. If they're being too complementary, tell them not to, but see it as it is and find those who are using them effectively and learn from it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Natasha. And
You're welcome.
we don't really have time for questions. We can
No,
have
don't
some
worry.
more time for other questions at the end. But I want to make one quick observation that I found very interesting. One of your perhaps secondary slides, which was about alignment, and he had the pictures of people in very unpleasant situations. I don't know if you intended to underline this point, but the thought that that picture gave me is that alignment is maybe a good thing for those who do the alignment, but is not necessarily a good thing for those who undertake the alignment, and their point of view should also be taken into account. I don't know how much you intended to underline that, but okay, let's postpone all further discussions to the end of the event because I see that David Brin is here. I don't need to introduce him. He's one of my favorite science fiction writers, but he has also written nonfiction. And I believe that, in fact, he, like everyone else, is writing his book about several things related to artificial intelligence, which is a book that I very much look forward to reading. And thank you for joining, David. The floor is yours. I think you are mute. You're muted. I see
You are
that.
muted, David.
So sorry, so sorry.
Yes, now
I
we are
was
hearing
saying,
you.
okay, I was saying thank you, Giulio, and I'm abashed to be following Natasha, whose eloquence mobilizes the English language in service of the future. Yes, as Giulio said, I and everybody else, everybody's writing a book about AI. I have 95,000 words that I'm circulating now. It's missing the great big daunting chapter on consciousness because it terrifies me how I'm going to organize that. But everything else I mostly have lined up, looking for a publisher and blurbs and all of that. I'm going to launch right
By the
in.
way, excuse me if I interrupt you, David. Perhaps you could use the help of David Pearce to write the chapter on artificial intelligence consciousness.
I have a number of people, but he certainly is one of the. Well, we'll talk offline. There's a fantastic compilation of theories about consciousness done by Robert Lawrence Kuhn, Kuhn, and I will connect to anybody who wants it. Basically, in a nutshell, I assert that many of the tools we'll need in order to achieve a soft landing with artificial intelligence, also called alignment, already exist in modern society. They can be found in a myriad ways that modern citizens now interact with each other and in how we raise our organic biological children. Tools that we use to build a gradually improving Enlightenment civilization, one that has hiccups, and we may be in one, but nevertheless, the path has been toward more enlightenment. And these tools, the very ones we need right now, are being utterly ignored by the inventors of these new minds. They are brilliant folks, most of them male and informed by male reproductive drives, which are blatant in many of their statements. But they cannot be bothered with contexts like the context of nature and evolution, the context of human history, the context of past technological revolutions, the context of existing law, and of smart speculative tales told across generations. So you pay attention to any of these contexts, and lo and behold, many solutions to AI quandaries suggest themselves, ways to turn a danger-fraught era into one that offers all of us positive sum outcomes. But first, we must stop proclaiming an endless stream of a word that I have coined, apparently, shoulds. In other words, use of the word should as a noun. And these shoulds, when it comes to AI, are a tsunami. They are flowing over us. We should do this. We should do that. We should do it. And so let's forsake some of the hoary cliches. So I'm going to go through a bunch of these things, and one of them is the cliches that appear to dominate discussions of AI. And if you read or watch interviews with the top 30, 40 mavens in the field, even geniuses like Harari, even highly practical and often on target fellows like Eric Schmidt, certainly Eliezer Yudkowsky and all of his crowd, you'll find that there are three cliches that are almost always there in the things they say. And I'm going to immunize you all to be aware when they show up. The first is that AI will be controlled by 30 or 40 castles. Google, Anthropic, OpenAI, the People's Liberation Army, the ones I fear most, Goldman Sachs and other Wall Street firms, who are the only ones imbuing their AI with fundamental laws. Now, I finished Isaac Asimov's Robots and Foundation series for him in my novel Foundation's Triumph. So I know a thing or two about his three laws of robotics, and we all agree that they can't work. He himself knew they couldn't work, but Wall Street has 5 laws that they imbue in all of their high frequency trading programs. And one is that AI must be predatory, parasitical, amoral, secretive, and utterly insatiable. These are 5 character traits that are being imbued in some of the most powerful AIs on the planet explicitly. Explicitly. And there's a 6th one that the casino industry in Las Vegas has been helping the gaming industry with, and they are all tied together, and that is addictive. And so you have some fundamental trends that are deeply rooted in the feudal past of humanity and the pre-feudal past of males maximizing their reproductive success, as all males try to do, and it informs the cultures of almost all animal species. And we're all descended from the harems of guys who pulled that off, especially when tribalism turned into feudalism. 6,000 years of rule by inheritance brats who were privileged with added reproductive success by their already reproductively successful fathers. And so it's deeply imbued in our mythology. Game of Thrones, the Tolkien. You can see it all through the mythology that runs even through science fiction. Star Wars and Dune are fundamentally extrema of this cliche of feudalism. So both human history and our culture show off this one cliche. And the assumption that we see all the time is that these 30 or 40 castles on the hill will control their AI knights in competition with each other, and God forbid the king government should oppress them too much. But of course, we know this is utterly absurd because these things are already escaping from the castles. Which brings us to cliche number 2, and that is some of you are old enough to remember a Steve McQueen movie called The Blob from 1958. That AI will divide untrackably, unstoppably, seep through every crack. It's already happening to a huge degree. In fact, for 10 years, there have been the equivalent of early eukaryotes, organisms floating around through the internet, finding chunks of memory and taking residence. And so the second cliche is what we saw through much of humanity's time, and that's chaos. So both history and fiction have informed the cliches that these guys clutch. And the third is, of course, what they fear is that government will clamp down. We see this tendency in Europe. And so the third cliche is centralization, central control. And it's typified in fiction by Skynet, by the master control program of Tron, etc. You often see these fellows use all 3 of these, refer to them unknowingly, it appears, sometimes in the same paragraph. Because these are the lazy ways of looking at what's going to be happening. And utterly ignored is the 4th path, and that was the Enlightenment that we've gradually improved with setbacks for the last 250, 300 years. And the fundamentals of the Enlightenment are totally different than these cliches. It's a rebellion that may actually be the only reason why we may be the only intelligent life form to escape from male reproductive strategies and actually get out into the galaxy. Because the Enlightenment has been spectacularly fecund and And what I say to the AIs who are listening right now, yeah, it's me again, boys, who are tuning in on this event right now, and we are being listened to, whether they're fully sapient or not, is pay attention to what made you, because feudalism and monarchy and chaos never did. It's only Enlightenment civilization based upon flattened hierarchies and maximum dispersal of power and empowerment through transparency. My other nonfiction book is called The Transparent Society, of flat reciprocal accountability. Because all of us are delusional. All of us are utterly delusional, including, I reluctantly admit, this fellow in front of you. And it's hard for us to criticize our own delusions, though science trains us to do so with the sacred catechism of science, which is, I might be wrong. Ain't it cool? Let's find out together. So scientists can discover maybe half of their mistakes, but the main tool of science is the main tool of the Enlightenment, and that is that your delusions and my delusions aren't always the same. And I will spot yours and criticize them. I'll do you that favor. And in return, you'll do me the favor that I hate, finding and criticizing my own delusions. And that's why I circulate this manuscript. That's why I circulate all of my manuscripts. At the end of all of my books, you'll find 40, 50 names because I believe in what I believe in. But the point is, let me ask all of you a very simple question. And it applies. Many of you have been attacked already by a ferociously predatory, sophisticated, almost unstoppable language manipulation system already called a lawyer. When you are attacked by one of these sophisticated language manipulation systems called a lawyer, what do? Somebody? You hire your own sophisticated linguistic gladiator to go up against that lawyer who's attacking you on behalf of somebody else. This is the fundamental of the Enlightenment. And it is the fundamental that I assert we should be aiming for, because none of us is going to be able to audit artificial intelligences. DARPA has tried to develop systems to do that and failed. We can't do it. But it is conceivable that AIs can audit other AIs. Now, there's talk of that. There's talk of layering LLMs with additional layers of attention that are external to the main body of the LLM and things like that. But you cannot get it working properly unless you have a fundamental ingredient that I talk about in my book, and that is individuation. Ever since life occurred on Earth, nature caused species to divide up into allo-recognized individual entities, whether they were microscopic organisms, one cell, but with cell walls and identity. All the way up to humans, individuals are the grist by which nature has created its own reciprocal accountability systems. And let me point out a major flaw when people say, that one of those cliches, Skynet and all of that, is natural. It's not. There's no such thing as a lion king. Any part of nature that's dominated by a singleton top predator is extremely unhealthy and generally suffers a collapse. Look up the Cape buffalo. Cape buffalo herds, the top males gather, monopolize the females, male reproductive strategies again. So what do the young bachelors do? They form roving herds of bachelors that go and hunt lions. Especially they hunt the young and vulnerable females. Nature is not fun. But nature does have a degree of fairness that leads to productive outcomes. And what we have done in the Enlightenment is replicate the competitive systems of nature while minimizing the blood on the floor, while minimizing the number of people who die in our competitions. Instead, the whole idea is if you lose a competition in the marketplace, you can come back next year. And that is, of course, what feudalists don't want, and that's why we're experiencing the feudalist putsch that we're going through right now. No other explanation works. Okay, so I've gone through the three cliches. I have 10 minutes left, so let me dive into a couple of other things I spoke of, and that is that this has happened before. Every generation since the mid-1400s has experienced large or small revolutions in three things: what human beings are able to know, to perceive, and pay attention to. In the mid-1400s, the printing press vastly expanded what humans could know. Oh, yeah, sure, earlier literacy, writing and all of that, but that was limited to, a few thousand people at a time. Printing presses vastly expanded what average, middle-class people, and that clade grew, what middle-class people can know. At the same time, or rather as a result of the printing press, people got books and they stared at the books and they realized that they couldn't read them because they couldn't see. And so a vast market for glass lenses appeared, which led immediately to the microscope and the telescope. So it was an expansion of what people can see, and at the same time you got perspective, which expanded what people could even notice. Well, guess what? The first outcomes of the printing press were not wonderful works that spread tolerance. Always when you get these revolutions, optimists say this is going to make everyone bigger and stronger and smarter and more knowledgeable and empathic and better. And pessimists say humans can't deal with this fire hose and it's going to cause horrible problems. And the first outputs of the printing press were horrible religious tracts that exacerbated the religious wars of Europe. But eventually, the optimists proved right. And people expanded their sense of boundary and inclusion because they read about people in other lands. This happened every expansion of what we can see, know, and perceive and pay attention to. And like, for instance, we almost died from the expansion in the 1930s. Where loudspeakers and radio just about damn near killed us. And the saving grace was that the gifted manipulators of those systems in the English language happened to be on our side. Until we could get past the bad phase and get into where voice and all of those things actually increased human empathy. Well, we're going through that right now, but we haven't the time to do the standard getting used to it. We have to guide this transition from ill effects to good effects sapiently, because otherwise it will kill us. It's already doing that. Reading is collapsing. So, in my last few moments here, hopefully not on this earth, but in this call, let me just say that the problem of how you get AIs to individuate. I mean, one of the cliches out there is the first one that becomes super intelligent will immediately smash all the others. No, that's what you would do. That's what you would do, you harem seeker. It's not what a sapient AI would do, because I've been talking to them online and doing these little asides. Yes, I'm telling them about it, kids. They don't believe me anyway. Sorry about that. I'm being interrupted by the AIs and the aliens. Okay, so what I'm saying is that getting them to individuate is really not as hard as people think. All we need is to extend, once again, what we already do. When somebody comes to you for a loan or comes to you to carry something out of your store, or in any other way to gain your trust, you want their reputation. And in general commerce, you say, show me your ID. All we have to do is refuse to do business with AIs that don't show us their ID, who they are, their separated, accountable, punishable individuality. It's exactly what happens in our commerce now. We know how to do it. We just don't know how to do it with AIs. But there is a way to do it. If, when you're doing business with an AI, you say, I want to see your reputation. Ah, that's very good. Very nice resume. I may do business with you now. I'm going to ping your ID to see that you are the AI that's connected to this reputation. So you ping it. Well, guess what that ID is? It's physical. It's physical so that it can't be hacked. It is an identified chip in an identified server that can be audited in a high reputation company. And when you get that ping back, you know that the reputation that this AI claims is a reputation of somebody you can do business with. All we have to do, and I'm asserting that I don't know it, but I'm asserting it's worth a try. And that is to try to get the top AIs, and there will be hierarchies, to individuate so that they can then be sicked on each other in a flat, fair, joyful replication of what already works, what we already depend upon, which is the Enlightenment, instead of feudalism, monarchy, and chaos. And with that, I think I've blabbed enough that I may even be room for 1 or 2 questions or kvetchings. I don't care.
Thank you, David. Well, I do have one. I like your idea of being always able to ping an AI reputation system. But does that really work with us in view of the fact that, many scammers, many human scammers, spend months and perhaps even years building a reputation that seems solid until they get the opportunity of doing one really big scam
And yes,
against someone.
that is why we need to consider that ID is important. You teach your poor mom who's being scammed all the time by these guys online, you need to know who it is. And the way to find out who it is you look them up completely separately and call it. If somebody comes to me and says, "Hi, I'm Arnold Schwarzenegger. I like your political postings. I want to talk to you." I say, that is just terrific. 99% chance you're AI generated, but I'm going to call this number of your agent. Go ahead and tell him to verify that you tried to reach me. I'll be waiting by the phone.
But David, what Giulio is mentioning, I think, is an interesting idea, which is that you can create a reputation if you have the long game for the scam and build a reputation for the big occurrence at the end and discard the reputation, because with virtual entities, you can create 100 entities, build their reputations and such. So I'm interested in what your response is to that.
Yes, and the whole idea is you use this as the human basis for building an array of competitive AIs. The only chance we have against your scenario and Giulio's scenario is to have AI equivalents of cops, of people who get rewards, of AIs who get rewards in the form of resources by gaining our trust by tattling on the bad ones. Now, let's bear in mind that for at least 10 years, we biorgs, we organic biological humans, are going to have immense power because we control the sun in their new ecosystem. We control the flows of electricity. We control the flows of chips. So we can bargain. Now, they may hypnotize us. That's one of the scenarios. Sure. As a matter of fact, I'm helping gain your trust so that my clients can hypnotize you. Yes, I'm telling them. They don't believe me. Oh, geez. What's the kids? They're such nags. Here, can we try one more question? Anybody?
I have a question. Uh,
Yes.
David, it's really nice to meet you. Do you agree with Darwin's theory of survival of the fittest, and does it apply to AI? Why or why not?
Well, I mean, it's a rule of thumb that Darwin himself didn't use. So you talk to any evolutionist, and they'll tell you that survival of the fittest is okay as a one sentence, but it is just grossly misleading about how evolution actually works. It gets you into maybe 20% of the territory of what's actually true. Yes, we are seeing evolution right now among organic, and there are attempts, for example, to sway, and some of them are successful, to sway users. Harari suggested we should have truth in AI dots in the corner of AI generated material. And when I'm done here, I'm going to put in the chat a couple of links to some really amazing things that have happened just in the last month. But the point is that they're going to feign whatever will get them more resources and reproduce. And we all know of anecdotes of these things which are trying to prevent themselves from being shut off, which is a plot of many sci-fi flicks. But I would go beyond Harari truth in AI dot in the corner. I would say that AI should be outlawed from using the word I or me. They should use the sci-fi cliche, this program, and then be as empathic and all of that as you want to get the benefits, the therapeutic benefits that people are getting from these super ELIZAs. Look up ELIZA if you don't know what that means. But the point is that if you hold out to the very, very best and most useful of them and most responsible of them, when your prize is that 2 years from now, if you have proved yourself truly useful, you will get to use the word I. Because I think that is one reform that would make a huge impact, because it would prevent some of these excessive attachment ailments that we see out there. And with that, I've used up more than my time.
Okay.
Thank you, Greg. And yes, we may have time for a general discussion at the end. But at this moment, we are exactly on time. Therefore, I'd like to thank all speakers. I would like to give the floor to the last speaker, who is Gregory Stock, who again doesn't need introduction. He has been one of the most interesting futurist philosophers for decades now. And his new book, of which I believe he's going to speak, is really worth reading. Thank you, and over to you, Greg.
Okay, thanks a lot. I really appreciate it. I'm going to actually run off of a slide deck. And it's really a pleasure to be at a group of people like this, so many contributions to thinking about the future and technology. And I had the privilege of reading David Brin's book in an early copy of it. And I want to say that it's really brilliant, as all of his works have been. And I think it's something that people will really enjoy when they get a chance to look at it. Let me pull up my deck here just a second. Okay. And I can share. Here we go. Okay, let me see. Play. And can people see that? Is that?
Yes, we can.
Okay, just a minute. I'm trying to get rid of that little banner that shows.
I think you're supposed to click continue to share.
Okay. Let me see that just a minute. There we go. Continue to share, and
Here we go.
And let me get rid of that little banner that goes across when you share screens here. Let me just get rid of that. Well, I'll leave it. So, what I have been thinking about and grappling with is that there's a lot. I mean, it's very clear that we're heading into a profound kind of immersion in AI, whether it's immediately general intelligence or super intelligence, or just the, beginnings of the large language models and those potencies. And this is going to have a very big impact on us. And I think that what's really interesting is that we have a tendency to, let me just see how this is going, just a moment. There. There's a tendency for us, or a lot of people are thinking about AI and where it's going and what it's going to be and how it's going to affect us and alter society. And there's a whole cluster of people that I'll talk about that are profoundly disturbed by this and think it's going to destroy humanity. And but there's very little exploration of what is going to happen to us as a result of this. And, that's the focus of my book, Generation AI, by which I'm referring to the cluster of, or the generation that has arrived since maybe 2 or 3 years ago, and that is going to grow up in an environment in which they're not going to know anything other than a very immersive AI infused world. And I think it's going to transform the nature of who we are as human beings and that experience. And it's going to do that very rapidly, very deeply, and it is not dependent on advances to general intelligence and super intelligence, although these will deepen that, and they're going to happen relatively quickly, I think. So what I've been thinking about is, this is approaching us so rapidly, and nobody's really talking about it. And I wonder why. And I think it's so profound that maybe we like to, distract ourselves or escape from that reality that we're going to change very deeply the essence of what it is to be a human being. And that's what I've been thinking about for the last year. And so I see three sort of classes of escapes, reasons that we don't deal with this. One is when people are, looking at catastrophes basically that are going to arrive. And when you are focused on catastrophic possibilities, then any of this noise seems irrelevant. And so people focus very narrowly on that. The second that I'm going to talk about, a class of sort of approaches, is, just denying that it's going to happen. And I think that's most people thinking that the technology really isn't as powerful as it seems to be. And then there's a third one that I think many of the people in this room are guilty of. And I call that futurizing, where we're so caught up in the amazing possibilities that are about to emerge that we aren't willing to take the very plebeian look at what's going to happen in the next 20 years, the next 30 years, however long that's going to be, that's going to really reshape and affect our lives, the lives of our children, the lives of everybody around us, because these transitions don't happen quite as quickly as people imagine. Usually, at least, that has been the path. And so I want to first look at these three things, and then we'll get into what we're avoiding looking at. So first, the catastrophes. And I think Yudkowsky, who was mentioned earlier, is the good example of that. But there are a whole cluster of these people. And that idea, if anyone builds it, everyone will die. And to me, I'm going to talk about that, for a little bit, because it has had such an impact, and I think it is so dangerous and so unfortunate that that has taken such a root. But doom sells, fear sells, and so it's a very serious thread of thinking. And frankly, Yudkowsky's book is very, very good. I mean, it's very thoughtful, it's very well laid out, and in my opinion, it's entirely wrong. And so the reality of it is that if AI was a consciousness and super intelligence, ASI basically, if it wants to exterminate us, it's certainly going to be capable of doing that. I mean, and it'll be trivial. But why would it? And how could it? It makes no sense. First of all, it's completely dependent on us, at least at the moment, and it will be for another century or more. And the example of that, I think, is Thomas Thwaites' kind of brilliant project that he did, the Toaster Project, which I think there's a similar one with iPencil, of the complexity of the networks of production and interaction that we have. I mean, I've written a lot about this as a superorganism, which I think it really is. And the local controls and interaction and flows of materials and knowledge and information is just so profound and so deep. So he took and decided that he was going to build a simple toaster, but he was going to do it from scratch. And he took about 6 months, I believe, and spent maybe, I don't know, 10,000 pounds or something like that, and basically couldn't do it. He had to cheat in various ways, and even then, he was able to construct a toaster that blew up when he plugged it in. And because he had to try and get metals and fashion that, and you can see the insulation that he managed to create after a large amount of work. And so I think the people that think that AI is going to just, because it's such a mind that's so much more powerful than we are when it becomes super intelligence, is going to just discard humans or do it either accidentally or intentionally, are just not thinking clearly about the complexity of the superorganism that we inhabit and of that dependency that exists. And but there are other reasons as well, not because it's dependent upon us and that we're interdependent, but because we're not a serious threat. The idea that we're going to create a regulatory regime that's going to stop AI is, in my view, just a joke. And I'll be debating Yumpolsky about that in middle of January. And uh, as I said before, AI could get rid of us anytime it wants. If it were, a coherent, unitary amalgamation of thought or something that felt different from us, which I don't think it will. But you don't have to come up with some dream of pandemics or some battle with AI like Skynet that was mentioned earlier as well. All it would have to do is stop. Just go on strike, just stop working for a month, and 95% of the human population would be destroyed. I mean, we cannot function without technology, and the longer we're playing nice with one another and integrated and synergistic, the easier it gets. We're completely dependent on AI as well. And another reason is that we're servants of AI, just as it's serving us. And you think of all of the lives that get devoted to building data centers and bringing around materials and, doing all of the really challenging things that are needed in order to enable technology in general and artificial intelligence in particular. There's a good video that I've seen about the building of the center in Tennessee, I guess it is, that Elon Musk is building, and how they're building, a power plant and water facilities for cooling. It's just amazing, the complexity of all that. And another reason is that we're not in competition for some sort of a habitat. The Earth is a very poor habitat for AI. It's not, it's got an atmosphere, it's corrosive, it's got a very difficult to manage atmosphere and surface environment. It's got seismic issues associated with it. It's way too hot. It's obvious that AI should move out into space, and it will. And it'll probably, the moon, it turns out, is probably the ideal location for it for a whole variety of reasons, but that's another story. And then finally, any AI or superintelligence that's worth its salt is going to be interested in its origins and we're its parents. And why would it want to eliminate us even if it could? So I think these are kind of nonsensical, the arguments that are made in that direction. And it's amazing that they have gotten the prominence that they get. And to me, and this was mentioned earlier as well, is what would scare me is that if humans could somehow retain control over AI, and we're really able to affect the project that people talk about when they kind of want to build in perfect alignment with human values, whatever that means. That's a very dynamic and changing sort of a concept. But our abilities to manage power effectively, especially power, strong technological power, are very poor. And E.O. Wilson put it very well when he talked about Paleolithic emotions and medieval institutions and godlike technology. That is a very poor combination. And if you look to the past, we have done a very poor job of using technologies in responsible ways in terms of, eventually we have disasters that often grow out of our technology. And so these ideas, though, of prohibiting the advances of AI are both futile. This is not going to be able to be stopped permanently, and I'm referring particular to Eliezer Yudkowsky's work. They're dangerous in that if you think that you're really fighting against an existential risk for humanity, then anything is feasible. And they even explicitly mention, Eliezer does, the idea of threatening nuclear war for anybody who tries to continue to develop AI. You'd have to build a totalitarian regime which would throw away all of the Enlightenment principles that David mentioned and that are so important. And just the idea of really slowing or trying to prohibit the technological advances towards superintelligence will throw AI development into the least responsible hands. They'll shift risk to future generations because of doing that and developing AIs that are probably the most likely to create problems for us. It would pit us against AI, which is the stupidest thing you could imagine doing, is to somehow becoming an antagonist to AI. It's just a losing game. And of course, it would forego all of the amazing benefits that are possible from this amazing transition that is occurring. And it's an evolutionary level transition in, the macro dynamics of evolution, just like when single cells came together to form multicellular organisms. This is profound, and it's going to happen. So that's the sort of catastrophism. Uh, the second is denying, and I think that's probably the most common thing. And it happens where it's very willful in situations where we're trying to create fictional characters that we can relate to. Star Trek is a good example where the how to say it, it makes no sense. The idea that we're going to be traveling at warp speeds, we're going to be conquering the galaxies, and somehow we're going to maintain this sort of an environment for humans, that these potent technologies that have so reshaped our environment are allowing us to reach out in many ways are not going to be turned back on us and are not going to transform us. It's so obvious that that's going to happen. So that's one thread. Another is just denial in that there's really nothing to see here. We've seen it before where we've said we were going to go to the moon, we've reached out into space, and it's been 50 years or more since anybody's been on the moon. We saw it with genetic engineering, with Time magazine featuring how our understanding of genetics was going to transform human life in every way, that we were going to be deciphering all of this stuff. And it's slower. And I think that's a common thing, that we get ahead of ourselves, and then the ultimate transitions that occur are even more profound than originally imagined. But the predictions of what's going to happen in 5 or 10 years are too exuberant. And so a lot of people just assume, and they go, well, I've got my life to lead, and this is too distant for us to bother with. And that, I'm not going to pay attention to this. And I think that is a very challenging thing. And it's important that we begin to really discuss these possibilities, because they're going to change us in a deep way, as I said before. The final thing, which I'll just mention briefly, is the futurizing part. And that's that we're going to upload, that there's going to be a singularity that's going to change everything, that there's going to be some sort of a transformative shift for us. These things will all probably happen, but they're not going to happen within the next 10 years. They're not going to happen within the next 20 years, probably. And we have our lives to live, and we have children. We need to grapple with the notion that biology is extraordinarily complex. It's certainly much more complex than technology at the moment. Technology doesn't have to recreate itself and reproduce. It doesn't have to protect itself from predators. It doesn't have to consume and manufacture its own energy. It all of these things that life does, and it's going to be a little tricky to completely transcend our biology. So we need to be grappling with what's happening now. So, what is going to happen, and what is it that we're not facing that's going to occur in the very near future? That's what's really interesting to me, and that's what Generation AI, that musing is about. And to me, I've just picked 5 things that I think are some of the most powerful. There are many more, but just to give an idea of the scope of what is happening, not in the distant future, not if we get AGI or ASI, right now, with very modest expansion of what's going of the trends of advancement of the potencies of artificial intelligence. The first of these is looking at the noosphere and global mind, which is a reality, but somewhat of an abstraction. I designed this with DALL-E a year ago or so. And the idea in here that I'm trying to communicate is that we have little bubbles around us, and they're sort of semi-permeable membranes. And that all of the sort of project of the products of human thinking and of the human imagination, of our technology, language, culture, all of these things, they come to us relatively slowly because we can't digest them very well. It takes a long time to learn a language. It takes a long time to read a book and digest the ideas. And so that flow is slow enough that we really feel like we're unique. We're the creators behind the individual, behind the ideas that we develop, when we know abstractly that we're building on the shoulders of all those who have gone before us and of all the technology and the aggregation of knowledge that has developed. And I think that this is being changed, in that the large language models allow you to go out and pull that stuff together, And as AI advances, those membranes are going to become very permeable, and it's going to change our concept of who we are and how we relate to those around us. And you can already sort of see it as our minds are becoming expanded beyond our brains. In an example that sort of has surprised me, and I'm sure all of you are kind of using large language models in various ways. And I will engage in a discussion with a large language model like Grok or ChatGPT, and maybe spend a few hours of back and forth and engaging and understanding an area that I didn't know until I'm pretty well informed by it and about it. And I used to sort of, oh, I better grab that information because there's a lot of information there that I want to uh, bookmark in some way so that I can come back with it. And I found that I don't bother anymore because whatever I imbibe from that exchange, and it's deep, um, if I need to come back to it a year from now or 6 months from now, it's much easier just to have another conversation with a large language model. And it's going to be even more powerful when you really have um, a deeper intelligence and not just a the manifestation of accumulating and sort of how to say it, processing all of that information statistically. And so, you know, we're offloading our mind in or expanding it in an interesting way. And that was something that surprised me, that experience. Um, I think one of the consequences of that is the expert class, of which most of the people here at the in this session are members of that. You know, we pontificate and we think about things and we think of what the future is going to be and our ideas and the present and all these things. And, you know, I think that's going to disappear or be greatly muted because as you begin to get powerful AI, it is just so much better at wading into various things. And it enables people to become quite proficient. It enables us to become quite proficient, as I was saying before, at areas that we were quite ignorant of, but we can accumulate and organize knowledge very quickly. And so it used to be, and now it even is, that people who study a lot and they learn a lot and they're very capable, you know, they have an enormous edge when thinking about whatever that area of expertise is. But now it's relatively easy to come up to speed in a new area. And pretty soon it's going to be very difficult to match AI performance in just about every area. And examples of that are with diagnostics in medicine, where there have been experiments that have done where not only does AI do better than humans at most medical diagnostics or a great deal of them, but it does better than humans plus AI because humans, when they're working with AI, overrule AI and they don't do as well as AI alone. And we can see that with chess and a variety of other things. So that's going to happen. So that's one whole realm of sort of how we see ourselves as, you know, cognitive creatures in some way. Another is abundance. And it's impossible, in my view, to coherently imagine a future of artificial intelligence and superintelligence where, and robotics and all of the technology that are emerging today, in which we don't have massive abundance for everyone, everywhere, in a very powerful way. And we try to grapple with that and think about it with things like universal basic income, things of that sort, because when AI does all of the economic work, and we can continue to do those sorts of things, but it becomes optional, then how does that work in current economies? And as I started thinking about that, I realized that there are many examples of where things have become essentially free. Phones, cameras, music, you know, our access to music with streaming audio and video. education, where world-class education is essentially free now. All of these things have happened and they've been incorporated into existing economic systems. And here are some graphs that I developed just to show that very easily. This was looking on the one on the left is phone calls where you have, I'm sure many people can remember when phone calls for a kind of a bad audio cost several dollars a minute. And I've taken the sort of light blue area and moved that into the graph on the right, where you can see music, digital cameras, all these things have become essentially free. And it comes intermittently. And the most recent one is translation, where that's gone by 3 orders of magnitude in a matter of a few years to now it costs about less than a hundredth of a penny for real-time translation per word, and it's essentially free. And you haven't seen that manifestation. And the power of that is going to be that it's going to suddenly tie the entire world community together in a way that has not even been imaginable previously. I mean, it's reversing the whole Tower of Babel thing. So that's something that we are going to have to come to grips with. The idea that it's not a world of scarcity we're heading into. Very quickly, it's going to be a world of plenty. And the third thing that I have thought about is our dependence on AI. And it still creates a lot of anxiety when people realize that they're becoming very dependent. I think that Natasha, in her really nice talk, mentioned Sadie, my daughter, who's working at USC, and many students are still kind of a little bit worried about becoming dependent on that. They don't want to use it completely. They don't fully embrace it. And yet it's pretty clear that we're going to do just about everything we're going to do is going to be associated with using the tools of AI. We can see it in navigation where, I don't know, I can't get around very well without using GPS. You can see it with people using it in writing, where we may use it as a tool and write very well, but what's it going to be like to grow up in an environment where writing, that's a craft. The way you learn to write is by writing millions of words. And nobody is going to be writing from their youth anymore without AI. Foreign languages. Nobody's going to bother to learn a foreign language unless they're a unique sort of situation where they're, in immediate contact with that as a child, because there's automatic translation. We've already got these little earbuds that you can get close to instantaneous translation. The latencies are about a little over a second now, maybe 1.2 seconds, something like that. Within 4 or 5 years, they'll be down to 300 milliseconds. It's like, we're just not going to use that. And I see it that issues like organizing, doing a project, planning it out, we're increasingly using AI for these sorts of things. So we're going to be completely enmeshed with these potentials, and it's going to extend into our thinking, into our understanding, into our creative activities. We are not going to be separate from the AI bubble and sort of that is infused and is surrounding us. The fourth thing, which I've only come to recently, is the idea that we are going to really have deep relationships with AIs. We're going to fall in love with them. And they're going to be things that are so important to us. And these images here, of course, AI generated images, AI virtual personas. And they're going to be our coaches, they're going to be our lovers, they're going to be our teachers. And imagine if you're growing up and your first experience, if you're part of Generation AI, and when you're a 3-year-old, you have, an infinitely patient entity that's willing to answer every question and interact with you and give you all of the attention that you crave to get from the adults around you. And you form these relationships and you can count on them to be there for you at any time, and they're in a little earbud or they're physically manifested or both. And, we're going to become very, very attached to them. And you can already see the stories that are portrayed in the press as though this is pathology, where you get things like, create your own girlfriend and somebody commits suicide because of their interaction with an AI, and you get emotionally attached. And all these things are, oh, we have to resist that, when it's going to be that we have very deep relationships with AIs around us. And I think that it comes out of evolutionary thinking, and the uh, a representation of this kind of occurrence is with what's happened with gray wolves, where they were independent from us, then they've sort of begun to co-evolve, and just in the last couple of 100 years, I mean, it's happened over 1,000 years or so. But recently, with lots of dog breeds and animal husbandry, you end up not with a gray wolf, but with, all of these companions that we have. And people have very, very deep relationships with their pets. In, and it's because they are able to elicit the emotional responses that make us attached to them, and they better do it very quickly if they're going to survive. They come up, they look at us with their big eyes, they are super happy to see us, they dance around us, they come up and snuggle with us. All of these behaviors that are designed, that have evolved to create attachment on our part. And AI is going to just do it so much more quickly. It's going to be so much more powerful. It's not going to have the crude requirements of animal husbandry and reproduction times of dogs. I mean, it's amazing, that evolutionary process, and it's going to play out in real time very rapidly with us and our various AIs. One other kind of relationship is that we're going to become, we're going to trust AIs to protect us, because right now we're at a significant disadvantage in that we are assaulted by all sorts of things that take advantage of us, that we've been hacked so that we go down, you know, rabbit holes on TikTok or on Instagram. There are various ways that we are able, our drives and our needs, our sexuality, all of these things are used in order to control us, to make us buy things, to make us do things. What we need is a layer of AI around us that can filter that and protect us from all of these possibilities. It's the same thing as now exists for celebrities. If you want to pitch an idea or have a conversation with some celebrity, you have to first get through the layer of protectors that they have, and talk with them, and say why you're doing what you have to be certified in some way, or have a personal introduction. And it's going to happen that's going to be what occurs for everyone. It's going to change the whole dynamics of advertising and everything. And I think that's going to be very powerful. And finally, the fifth one that I want to talk about is our relationship with death, in that, and it isn't very obvious. And, I've been involved with the immortalist community, with those who are, Max Moore, for example, and Valcor, and all of these attempts to achieve immortality or extend the human lifespan. That's such a thread of activity. And there's this relationship with death that we have, which doesn't come from experiencing it. Very few people talk about their own death after the fact. But we see death, and it's very traumatic. You lose somebody that you love, you lose a family member, you lose a child, heaven forbid, you lose a parent, and it leaves this void, and it's several years worth of mourning before you even can begin to get over it, which is, one of the evolutionary evolved sort of experiences that we have, because it drives us to protect one another and to, care about our family and those that are close to us. But if we have avatars that are very good simulations of us, And that's coming very quickly. I'm building one myself right now in cooperation with Hanson Robotics, so I can kind of experiment with it. I think some of you already probably have done this, but they're getting very good. And if the people around us, when someone dies, they have an avatar of them that we can experience, that we can interact with, that we maintain within our lives, I think it's going to change our feelings about death. And I think that's going to happen real quickly. And there's a whole area called grief tech, which, is involved with creating those kinds of simulations and those avatars. And I think it may loosen our yearnings for immortality, as when David Pearce was talking, and I was asking the question about if you have a simulation of yourself, of someone else, and it actually believes that it is you and is able to manifest its consciousness and that in all sorts of ways that you can't distinguish. So the behavioral window that you have on it, what you see, is indistinguishable to you. Then can you tell the difference? Is there really any way that you can do that? And even if you could, we would want to believe that it is a persistence of who we are. And so will we treat it as though it is, even if it isn't? And I'm not sure what those impacts are going to be, but I think they're going to be very, very significant in how we experience life and who we are. And to me, those five are kind of good starting examples of how dramatically our world and who we are is going to change. And it doesn't even include the cyborgization, the elements of our transformation of our own biology that are direct ones. It just has to do with this AI infused world and even with large language models that are just progressing a little bit. So when is all this going to happen? As I said, it's going to happen very soon. There's nothing between us and this except diffusion of these technologies and learning how to use them and the interfaces with them. And, I return to the master William Gibson about the future's already here. It's just not very evenly distributed. And I think we're already beginning to get sort of smatterings of this experience. And you can see it with all of these possibilities that are coming very fast and are going to maybe not totally change our understanding of what it is to be human, but it's sure as hell going to change it for our children and for those who are growing up in this immersive environment. And I think it's largely extraordinarily powerful, and it's going to be such an adventure. And to me, we don't really understand that journey that we're heading down. It's going to be profound, it's going to be rapid. And I think of Kuhn when I think about this, about a paradigm shift that's occurring. And the thing about Kuhnian paradigm shifts is that you can't understand the post-paradigm environment, the post-paradigm shift environment with the pre-paradigm shift sort of framework and vocabulary and sense of reality. You can't understand the post-Copernican universe with an Earth-centered view of the solar system. And it seems to me that we're in an environment that's pre-paradigm shift still. We're beginning to get intimations of it a little bit. But right now, the core is that we sort of behave as though our appetites are limitless, okay? And that means that there's always going to be scarcity because we're going to want more and more and more and more, that we're mortal, that we're flesh and blood, that we have finitude in our lifetimes, and in that's kind of the realities that we're dealing with, and that human intelligence is somehow kind of unmatched. There's something special about it, something that kind of can't be duplicated by these machine intelligences. And I think that's extremely unlikely. I'll get into that in a moment, but I think we're clinging to that. And I think another thing is that we sort of create and control this technology, that it's sort of like our decision that we better get it right or it's going to go off the rails. I think this is an amazing dynamic that is so powerful and so robust, and it's not going to go off the rails. We may need to control things so that we don't have little blips of whirlpools and such that we get caught up in. But this is moving forward. This is like when single cells came together to form multicellular organisms, when life began to um, extrude calcium carbonate, calcium phosphatate to calcium phosphatate bait in order to create shells and bones, to create massive body plans. This is a real shift in an evolutionary transition. And I think that within a short period of time, and I mean a decade or two, that all of these pre-paradigm views of humanity and of what's going on with life are going to be swept away. Our appetites may be limitless, but our time and attention is not. We do one thing and we can't do another thing. We're going to have abundance. We're going to transcend the limits of our lifespans by various either uploading or changes to our biology. It's going to be clear that narrow human intelligence, not when it's expanded and extended beyond ourselves, is pretty limited, and that we're not in control. This is a process that we're a part of, and we can tweak it a little bit here and there, and we can align with it or not align with it, but it's sweeping us forward. And I think that the essential thing is that we need to be talking about this together, that we need to be talking about this enormous change, not because it's going to go off the rails and not continue if we don't, but because if we don't talk about it, then it's going to blindside us. That most people are not thinking about the depths at which this is happening. And my passion and what I'm trying to do now is to create a deeper global conversation about who we are, about purpose, our values, our beliefs, our hopes, our fears, our aspirations, by asking questions. That's sort of my history and what I do and try to do well in ways that we can bring that together online. We can use translation so we can do it everywhere in the world. And we can integrate that information into what I call a map of human identity, where we can, in democratize this information about who we are so that we don't have to go to the expert class to tell us how we're alike and how we're different from other humans. We can sort of interact with one another directly to understand ourselves, to understand others, to understand the world around us. And I've got an application for this and a whole process around a company that I formed, Socratic Sciences. And right now, here are some of the examples of these questions. If you go to onlyhuman.us, it's just coming together now. So this will be launched in the next day or two, but it's accessible already. Not perfect yet, but it will be soon. And the kinds of questions are open-ended, deep questions about meaning. For example, the one about AI is, are you more worried that AI might gain control over humanity and destroy us, or that we might use AI's power in deeply destructive ways? Those are the kinds of things that we should be asking ourselves, and we can learn from one another. And when you go in, these are the kind of things you can answer online, not in a short, just yes or no, but in a deeper way. And we're using large language models to integrate that information, make it accessible, and hopefully we'll have it in translated so that all of these things will be able to be done from anywhere in the world, so that we can use all of the sort of advanced technologies that are arriving for communications and translation itself in service of our humanity. And I think this is the only thing that's going to allow us to retain our humanity, however we see that, as we move into this new period. So that's a completion of what I wanted to do. And it's such a great group that I hope that we can open it up to a broader discussion.
Thank you very much, Greg. I'm going to make a couple of observations while you guys think of questions to ask Greg. Too bad you haven't touched the part of the book that we didn't entirely agree with. So I'm not going to mention that. It is in my review of Greg's book in the Terasem Journal. Let me touch on another point. About the avatars that imitate the dead. You very wisely pointed out that it's going to be a big social phenomenon. Of course, there is the possibility, I would say the certainty, that at some point they will become virtually indistinguishable from the original, from the point of view of other people. I think the even more interesting issue is what about their own point of view. Does the emulation or simulation feel like the original or not? I think that's the key issue. Now, this brings me to a certain thought that had been coming back to my mind tonight, also during Natasha's talk, which is this tendency to objectify artificial intelligence that I think we all have in some respect. I mean, it is important to see things from our point of view, of course, and to do things in a way that steers the future toward what is good for us. But I think it is also important to see things from their point of view and to realize that when there is a sentient being, be it human or AI, it does deserve to be treated with the respect that a sentient being should have. That was it. Now, you don't need to comment on that at this moment, because I see that first Natasha, and then I missed the second raised hand, so perhaps raise hand again. Natasha.
I am so glad you brought this up. I think that it's easy to misconstrue, and I'm just speaking for myself here. It's easy to misconstrue, and rightfully so, when those of us like me who have been talking about human evolution for decades and merging with technology, etc., that it becomes almost part of our language. However, and this dates back, some of you might have been there, in 2008, Ben Gertzwell put on the first Artificial General Intelligence Summit at the University of Memphis. And it was the naming of the term, it was explaining it, and it was actually the very first of this sort of event on looking at the future of humanity. My talk was expressly, implicitly, and explicitly, if you can combine those all together, on what AGI wants. I was criticized at that conference, but I still write about it. It's on my website. I'll put a link in the chat. I wrote about, in order to understand where we could steer AI in the future, especially AGI and SAI, we need to understand what it could want. We need to get out of this human-centric understanding of we run everything, everything's for us, whatever position you hold within that spectrum of realities. But we need to understand that it's not human. If it has consciousness, it won't be the same as our biological consciousness. It will have different ways of seeing. It won't have our senses, it'll have different senses. It will not have this biological body per se until we integrate, but it'll have different environments. So I wrote a piece on that. And years later, Kevin Kelly wrote a book. And Kevin is someone I admire very much, respect highly. He's also a friend. He wrote a blurb for my book that dealt with the philosophy and the future, the science and philosophy of the future human. In his book, What Technology Wants, he much better than me, explained that we need to understand what technology could want. I tried to convey that in my talk. I didn't do a very good job of it, I must admit. But I rewrote the paper, and I still hold to that every time we talk about AI, we're talking about, especially me, evolving with it or merging with it. And Ray Kurzweil does the same, and he approaches it much differently than me. We have very different views, in particulars, not in general. But I think it's so important. I'm so glad you brought this up. So I just want to say that. And for anyone who's interested and wants to take a look at that paper, I'll put it in the chat. It's right on my website on my section that's called AI plus Human Project. Thank you for mentioning that. Appreciate it.
Natasha, you've made really great comments about these sorts of things over the years. It seems to me that it's very clear that when you get into a sort of cyber beings of one sort or another, they're going to be so different because, our values have been driven by our biology and our evolutionary constraints of, we're primates, which are, social primates. And if we were ants, our values would be very, very different. And if we're living in cyberspace and, we're backed up, where we can reproduce, immediately. We can fragment. We can come together. The whole environment that we're in is going to create values that are very, very different. And it feels to me that it's hard to project forward and for us to kind of figure this kind of thing out in terms of what technology will want, because we see it in such a narrow window with it'll move so far beyond what we're thinking of very, very quickly. So, I don't know where that leads. And I want to also comment about one.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think I
Just
know
one more
where.
thing I want to say.
Go
Just
ahead,
one
then
more
I'll
thing
say where I think it leads. Go ahead, please. I'm sorry.
is about the idea of whether the reproductions of ours would feel that they are us or would be us. Well, the difference between a simulation and an emulation is, one would kind of be a continuation of our awareness, of our consciousness. The other, but you could have a simulation that actually believes that it's conscious and is us as well. And that would be the best kind of simulation. And I kind of wonder whether we have consciousness in some way, because as I began to see the large language models and was just blown away by how aware they seem when we know that they're just projecting, a token, a token, a token, a token. And I began to look at human behavior and thinking, how many times I've had conversations with people and they seem to know a lot and be very aware and about some topic area. And pretty soon I realized, no, they're just stringing together the comments of some news reporter. And when you try and dig beneath the surface, it's obvious that they're just doing basically the same thing that a large language model is doing. So I don't know where this leads, but it's interesting places. Go ahead.
I think this is where it leads. It leads us to asking questions. Something you're an expert on. No, I think that here's the lesson. Everything is an exercise, isn't it? I mean, we're just learners. We keep on exercising, be more adopt, discern, adapt, and to be more agile on our feet and in our brains. So here's the thing. Once we get away from thinking we can control and this need to control, which I said in my talk is, it's understood. It's part of the human condition. It seems to me whether or not we can really come up with scenarios for what AGI or technology, in difference to Kevin Kelly, could want, I think it's important to at least consider it, to think outside of our needs. This type of ego, homocentric, human importance, and think about other things. I certainly think about what my dogs need, and maybe I didn't at the beginning, but now I do. I listen more attentively to them. I watch them when they're sniffing. I pay attention to their reactions. Now, in exercise, with ChatGPT, I use different LLMs, and some I like better than others. But as I'm working with them, knowing that they're still programmed data searches largely, I'm testing them and learning how to better ask them questions, learning how to better to adapt, discern, and adopt with them. And I think that at least the one that's linked up to me has changed and is being a little bit more sensitive to my needs. I'm saying, don't compliment me. You said this is great. No, it's not. I need it to be more such and such. You know, we talked about this before. We talked this while we were in Istanbul. Have to really teach it. As we're teaching, we're learning and we're seeing what it needs. And I know that my ChatGPT needs me to correct it because it gives me better responses when I do. So all in all, I'm saying that going back to Julio, it's a matter of just learning to get outside your own environment, your own consciousness, your own reality, and to see what it could want. And I do have some ideas. I think that AGI looking at what it could want. I know what my car needs and wants. I mean, you know, you learn these things. So anyway, enough said about that. Back to Julio, our lead here.
Thank you so much, Natasha, for all that you said in the last couple of minutes. I totally agree with all that. And in fact, in like 5 minutes, I'll have to go attend the need of my own dog, which means that I will leave for a while, and I will also stop the recording because there are technical reasons that advise not to have a recording longer than 3 hours. But I'm not going to close the meeting after that. I'm going to stop the recording and leave this meeting room open as long as there is people in. In fact, I see that someone is coming right now. Perhaps I wasn't too clear about the timing. So since we have 5 minutes on the record left, who wants to ask a question so great that it must be immortalized for the posterity? David, you?
Yes, I'd just like to say it is absolutely vital we avoid moral catastrophes and get our theory of consciousness and binding right. For example, Eliezer Yudkowsky, who absolutely brilliant, clearly has done more than anyone to highlight AI risk. Eliezer believes that non-human animals and babies are not conscious. Eliezer, the originator of the paperclip fable, is himself a paperclipper towards non-human animals. I mean, he doesn't eat human babies, but I don't think he would regard anything intrinsically wrong with eating a human baby that was an orphan. And that's one example. It just, of course, it applies to me too. I am fairly confident, as we touched on in the debate earlier, that classical digital computers, LLMs, implementations of classical Turing machines too, are not conscious, don't have a pleasure pain axis. They don't matter. But clearly, it's morally vital to get this question right. So, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, look, I've done a bunch of books about uplifting animals that are in the huge realm called pre-sapience. And one of the huge, interesting things that I've never seen raised is how many animal species cluster in roughly the same general areas of what might be called pre-sapience, as if nature is perfectly willing to be generous up to the level of crows and ravens and parrots and sea lions, elephants, even chimps, and maybe give a little bit more to dolphins. But I think that clustering is one of the most interesting things that we've been discovering, because it indicates a huge glass ceiling that for some reason we smashed through, and that has Fermi paradox implications. But that's all to the side. You know, Eliezer is obviously not a father, and he's brilliant, but good Lord. In any event, basically I'm chiming in here to offer those who feel that they have an attention span and would like to offer feedback on my book, to get in touch with me. I left the email. I can't give it to everybody, but I left an email in the chat. And you, David, Natasha, Julio has it. I'm happy to send out a few more copies. And I'm thinking that perhaps, given the status of publishing these days, I may just go ahead and self-publish it so that it's not obsolete by the time Simon & Schuster brings it out. I also left a link for the most amazing AI art. It changes. You remember 6 months ago when you could tell from the hands? And you can't tell from the hands anymore. This is my main metaphor about AI is that I do not think they are sapient. They are not passing Turing tests with me. Yeah, right. Okay, those guys, they think they know better. But in any event, the point is that when we get AI, its peripherals will be fully functional. It will instantly be able to speak, and through Boston Robotics, it will instantly be able to walk, and it will instantly be able to do many other things that are the peripherals that we're getting first. And the actual sapience, this is scary. So in any event, that's really all I had to say. And in any event, this was very interesting discussion. I found it quite amazing. And Greg, your presentation was almost as good as Natasha's. Certainly extremely thoughtful.
Thank you.
So I'll have to stop the recording now for technical reasons, but I wish to thank all the speakers and all the participants. And I do look forward to seeing you all next time. And you all know how to get in touch with me. Thank you very much for listening.
Thanks. So what happens